The people of Black Hollow laughed when Elias Kane bought the dead ranch. They laughed even harder when they learned he had paid almost nothing for it. The ranch stood 3 miles outside town, surrounded by dry grass, broken fences, and a house that looked like it had been abandoned by the living, and claimed by the dead. For 15 years, nobody had stayed there. The locals called it Dead Man's Ranch. They said the previous owner, a wealthy cattleman named Samuel Rook, had disappeared one winter night with his wife and 2 sons. No bodies were ever found. No horses were stolen. No footprints led away from the property. The family simply vanished. And now, after all those years, a stranger had come riding into Black Hollow with a worn saddle, a black coat, and a face that revealed nothing. His name was Elias Kane. He was somewhere in his late 40s, though the hard lines around his eyes made him look older. He spoke only when necessary. At the general store, the town's loudest men gathered around him. "You really bought that cursed ranch?" one of them asked. Elias simply nodded. Another man laughed. "Friend, you won't last a month." Elias looked at him for a moment. Then he said quietly, "We'll see." That was all. By sunset, Elias was standing alone inside the abandoned ranch house. Dust covered everything. The fireplace was cold. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. But Elias wasn't looking at the broken furniture. He was studying the walls. He knew this place. Not because he had ever lived there. Because he had been here once before. 20 years ago. Before the ranch became abandoned. Before Samuel Rook disappeared. Elias walked into the old bedroom and pulled away a rotten wooden board. Behind it was a small iron symbol carved deep into the wall. His expression finally changed. Someone had left a message. And Elias knew exactly who had carved it. He reached into his coat and touched an old silver badge hidden beneath the fabric. Then, from somewhere outside, came the distant sound of a horse. Elias stepped toward the window. A lone rider had stopped at the edge of the property. The stranger raised his voice. "Is Elias Kane here?" Elias stared at him. He already knew what was coming. Because somewhere beyond the hills, 30 armed riders were heading toward Black Hollow. And every one of them had come looking for him. By sunrise, everyone in Black Hollow knew. 30 riders were coming. They weren't ordinary travelers. They were outlaws. Men with black hats, loaded rifles, and reputations that had spread across 3 territories. The town went silent as the riders appeared on the distant ridge. One by one, they descended toward Black Hollow. At their front rode a tall man with a gray beard and a long scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His name was Cole Ransom. And when Cole entered the town, he asked only one question. "Where is Elias Kane?" Nobody answered. The townspeople suddenly remembered how they had laughed at the stranger. How they had called him foolish for buying the dead ranch. Now, not one of them wanted to speak. Then the old bartender finally stepped forward. "He's outside town." Cole smiled. "Dead Man's Ranch?" The bartender slowly nodded. Cole looked toward the horizon. "That's where we'll finish this." At the ranch, Elias stood on the porch. He watched the 30 riders approach. He didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't run. He simply waited. Cole stopped his horse a few yards away. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Cole laughed. "So it's true." Elias remained silent. The great Elias Kane is still alive. The townspeople who had followed the outlaws to the edge of town stared in confusion. Cole looked at them. "Your quiet rancher isn't a rancher." He pointed at Elias. 20 years ago, that man wore a badge. He hunted the Ransom gang from Texas to Montana. A murmur spread through the crowd. Elias finally spoke. "That was a long time ago." Cole's smile disappeared. Not for us. He explained that Elias had destroyed their gang 20 years earlier, sending most of their men to prison. But Cole had escaped. And he had spent 2 decades building a new army. 30 men. 30 guns. 30 reasons to kill Elias Kane. But Cole had made one mistake. He thought Elias had bought the ranch by accident. He didn't know the truth. Elias walked inside the house and lifted a loose floorboard. Beneath it was a narrow staircase leading underground. A hidden tunnel. At the bottom stood an old wooden chest. Inside were papers, photographs, and a leather journal. Evidence. Proof of every crime the ransom gang had committed. Elias had not returned to Black Hollow to start a new life. He had come back to finish something that had begun 20 years ago. Outside, Cole raised his rifle. "Bring me Elias Kane." 30 outlaws loaded their weapons. Elias closed the chest. Then he looked toward the tunnel entrance. For the first time in 20 years, he smiled. "They came exactly when I knew they would." And then the first gunshot echoed across the dead ranch. The first bullet shattered the window above Elias Kane's head. Then another. And another. The 30 outlaws opened fire. But Elias was already gone. He disappeared through the hidden tunnel beneath the ranch house, leaving the outlaws believing he had fled. Cole Ransom kicked open the front door. "Find him." His men rushed inside. But the ranch was no ordinary abandoned house. Elias had spent weeks preparing it. One outlaw stepped onto the floor. A rope snapped. A wooden beam crashed down, sending him sprawling. Another opened a door and found nothing but darkness. Then the door slammed shut behind him. From the outside, the townspeople heard the outlaws shouting. For the first time, they understood. Elias Kane hadn't been hiding from the ransom gang. He had been waiting for them. Cole realized the truth too late. "The tunnel," he shouted. He ran toward the old bedroom and found the hidden entrance. But Elias was already waiting below. The 2 men stood face to face in the darkness. Cole raised his gun. "You should have stayed buried with the past." Elias looked at him calmly. "The past is exactly why I came back." Cole laughed. "You think some old papers can stop me?" Elias opened the wooden chest. Inside were the names of every man in Cole's gang. Every robbery. Every murder. Every secret. But there was something else. A letter written by Samuel Rook 20 years earlier. Cole's smile disappeared. Elias explained that Samuel Rook had discovered the gang was using his ranch as a hiding place. He had threatened to expose them. That's why Samuel and his family had vanished. But before they disappeared, Samuel had hidden the evidence beneath the ranch. Elias had spent 20 years searching for it. And now, finally, he had found it. Cole raised his gun. But before he could fire, a voice came from behind him. "Drop it." The sheriff stood at the tunnel entrance with several armed townsmen. The people of Black Hollow had finally chosen a side. Cole slowly lowered his weapon. By sunset, the 30 outlaws were either captured or running for their lives. The town was safe. And the dead man's ranch was no longer dead. Weeks later, Elias repaired the fences and planted new grass around the old house. The people who once laughed at him now came to help. One evening, the old bartender asked him why he had bought the ranch. Elias looked toward the setting sun. "Because some places aren't meant to stay haunted forever." He walked toward the house. Behind him, children played where weeds had once grown. The town had called him a fool for buying a dead ranch. They never realized the truth. Elias Kane hadn't come to rebuild the past. He had come to bury it. And this time, the dead were finally allowed to rest.